Alright, so this is for my assignment for Bio 100, and I will be teaching you some evolutionary concepts, teaching about diversity and natural selection, specifically, just as the most basic principles and driving forces of evolution.
Go on.
So, what I'd start with, well, in my head what I start with is a bunch of dogs specifically. Because when you say diversity, it's just a bunch of characteristics in animals, mixed and matched randomly, originally, and my best visualization is in dogs, because you get dogs of all kinds, small, tall, big ears, little ears, and as many different varieties as there are of dogs now. There used to be many more, just in small, different ways, different sized limbs or colors, whatever it be. So you have diversity, a bunch of different types of characteristics in an animal. And then you have natural selection, which is the process through which those diverse animals get narrowed down into specific adapted categories over time. And it's just generations, living and dying, the next generation, next generation. So you have a bunch of dogs, right? Mm-hmm. Say you're in Europe, and the dog's survivability and their breeding is based a lot on humans. In this case, we're talking about domestic dogs. And the humans in this area of Europe are going to talk about they need dogs that can hunt small animals. That's what they're looking for. So they're going to breed or buy or seed, indeed, dogs with small legs, dogs that can be very vicious when they need to be, dogs that are loyal to follow their hunters, and ultimately they can fit into the burrows and chase a badger right through his den. And so those are the dogs that get fed. Those are the dogs that get bred, more importantly, and so every generation, the entire pool of dogs in that area becomes more and more that ideal. Shorter legs, streamlined body, all of those factors. Until you get to today, a lot farther along that path, and you have an entire breed of dog called a dachshund, or a badger dog, bred to go after badgers. And that's just one example. Same thing happened in many different ways for many different purposes with all different types of domestic dog. And in fact, dogs in general, which started out just as wild wolves and became bred for being docile or for being loyal or for hunting and became the domestic dog. So, does that make sense? I'm sure you could think of another example of animal that has happened to, some kind of a condition that's allowed an animal to evolve the way it has.
Yeah, there's a group of Russia that has tamed foxes, and so they started breeding the more docile ones. Now people have them as pets.
There you go. That's a great example. And even now I don't think of foxes as being docile, but because there has been a natural selection, albeit in this case aided by humans, there's now a breed of fox that can be kept as a pet. That's an example of natural selection primarily through breeding, human beings breeding an animal. And that's one of the two most important factors. So the example we were given in class was moths, where you have a certain type of moth which came in two different colors, primarily, a white and a black. And in the area that they lived originally, the trees and the foliage was primarily white. And as a background, the predators that ate the moth, the birds generally, couldn't see them as well if they were white as if they were black. So the black moths would be eaten more often, and the white moths would survive, therefore, more percentage-wise, more of them would survive to the point of breeding. Surviving and breeding. It's natural selection. And then when conditions changed, pollution, whatever it was, and the bark, the plants began darkening, becoming more and more coal black, the white moths were now the ones that could be more easily seen, more easily eaten, and Therefore, they begin to die out, not just because they were being eaten that way, but because they bred less and less each generation. And to this day, there are more black mounts than white in that area. So, that's evolution. You start out with diversity created by mutation, random genetic, what would you call it? Random genetic changes, yeah, whatever it is, and little things, one at a time, that get narrowed down by the conditions of the world around them until it's something that can survive. And it has survived because it can survive. Do you have any questions?
So quickly, evolution is just the way of all these different species that you narrow down to ones that can survive and reproduce. And diversity is just that there's not many of them.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Sounds good.